Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Planning Committee. First of all, there is a few matters of housekeeping. Audio recordings are made of all meetings, and these recordings are published on the Council's website. Please, would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone at all times. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and the use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, by visitors is welcome, but you're requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent, and to not to use voice or camera flash functions. Those using such devices are asked to remain seated at all times. We may have a break at 8 o'clock, subject to the items remaining. There are no planned fire alarm tests, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest available exit and go to the assembly area in the car park at the rear of the Town Hall. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. I am the Chairman, Councillor John Manning. On my right is Deputy Chairman, Councillor Jessica Scott-Patel. The rest of the committee are opposite and will introduce themselves, starting on the extreme right with Councillor Sykes.
Laura Sykes from Sternway Ward.
Pauline Hazel, Shrub End Ward.
Patricia Moore, West Mersey.
Peter Chillingworth, Great Tay Ward.
Jackie McLean, Copford and West Stanley Ward.
Brian Jarvis, Lexington Ward.
Jo Hayes, Castle Ward.
Helen Choas in Enns Ward.
Dave Harris, Beerchurch Ward.
Mike Lilly, East Donlan Ward.
Okay, thank you very much. The planning officers this evening are Alistair Day, Mark Russell, Sue Jackson, James Ryan, Eleanor Moss, Chris Harden, Simon Cares. There is also Sam Riley and Dr. Jess Tipper, who I believe is the archaeological officer. Amanda Chidgey, who's behind me, is here for procedural matters. To all those present in the room at this meeting, we are a quasi-judicial committee. We make our decisions based on material planning considerations following the laws of the land and the policies of the council. If we are minded to refuse an application, we will use such considerations that will stand up in a court of law. The material planning considerations are listed in the committee's agenda. Okay, item 2, have your say. Apart from items on the deferred recommendation overturn procedure, has everyone who wishes to speak registered their name? If not, please do so now.
There is no one else indicating, Chairman.
If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items in the agenda this evening, could they please do so now?
There's no one indicating, Chairman.
Substitutions for this evening, we have Councillor Harris for Councillor Scott. Item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. 7.3, I have a non-pecuniary interest, as I know the agent from my times of football days, Rowage and Severals, the good old days. And 7.4, I have a pecuniary interest, as I called the application some time ago, and I shall be leaving the chamber for that item.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Chairman, I have a non-pecuniary interest because item 2, I was in the Young Farmers with the applicant's father.
Was that a while ago, Councillor Chillingworth?
55 years.
Okay. Item 6 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of June 2015. Is that a question? Is that a question or are you proposing? Councillor Sykes has proposed. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Chillingworth. All those in favour?
That's approved, Chairman.
Okay, I shall now go through the items one at a time, giving the speakers for and against. Item 7.1, we have Ben Payne speaking for only if there is a speaker against. However, there were things that were brought up in the site visit that I think we do need to discuss, so we are going to call that out anyway, or I would like to call that out anyway. 7.2, we have Russell Cowan against, Robert Strathern for, and Councillor Chapman as a visiting councillor. 7.3, we have Chris Singleton against, Alan Sherwood for, and Councillor Liddy as a visiting councillor. 7.4, we have no speakers. 7.5, we have Stuart Wilshire against, and a visit from Councillor Roger Buston. 7.6, we have no speakers. So if Ms Gigi could confirm which we could take en bloc.
Chairman, the committee could choose to take an en bloc decision as you have no speakers registered for item numbers 7.4 and 7.6.
Okay, we'll do these one at a time because Councillor Lilly has to leave for one of them. So if we do 7.6 while he's still in the room but leaving, can we have a proposer? Councillor McLean, seconder. Councillor Chillingworth, all those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Councillor Lilly can now leave the room. Okay, item 7.4, could I have a proposer? Councillor McLean, seconder, Councillor Chillingworth, all those in favour? Thank you. Could we now invite Councillor Lilly back in? And over to Alistair Day.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a Winter Wonderland event within the upper grounds of Castle Park, centred around the castle. The application site on the slide is identified in red. The proposal is for, as I say, a Winter Wonderland event. There is an ice skating rink located in this position, and then markets, stalls, located to the west of the castle, and then to the north of the castle there's food stalls and fairground carousel rides. The proposal is to operate the event from the 26th of November through to the 3rd of January, operating between 10 and 10 Monday to Saturday and 10 till 9 on Sundays. The application has been subject to public consultation and there's been a number of representations received, but the main representations are from the Dutch Quarters Residents Association and the Castle and Roman Road Residents Association. One local resident has also raised an objection. The objections essentially relate to noise and disturbance from the event and issues of relating to parking. As members will note from the committee report, there are a series of conditions that are aimed at sort of mitigating the potential impacts of noise and disturbance on local residents. The first one to note is condition 12 that requires the noise or music generated from the event to be 55 decibels at the boundary of residential properties. There's also condition 13 on the report that requires games to be not audible from the boundary of the site. There's actually a typographical error that not should be removed from the condition as drafted in the report. Members raised concern about the noise from the generators that are located to the north of the fish pond. The generators are of what's known as the silent type, so that they're essentially encased in sound acoustic casing to limit noise. But it is suggested that a further condition is added to the report that requires no generators or other plant and machinery to be heard, should not exceed 5 decibels above the background level on the Castle Park. That is considered appropriate in order to sort of safeguard any potential noise from the generators. Historic England obviously have been consulted on the application as the grounds are a scheduled monument and the castle's Grade 1 listed. And they have confirmed they are content with the mitigation strategy that's been put forward. They've also confirmed that they have recommended scheduled entry monument consent is granted for the event subject to conditions, and that's currently awaiting ratification from the Secretary of State. On the basis of the recommendation of the report is that it is approved subject to conditions. I'll perhaps leave it there and allow members to sort of quiz further on any particular issues that they have. Thank you, Chairman.
Could I call Mr. Payne, please? You'll have 3 minutes from the time you press the buzzer. The bell will go at 2, just so you've got 1 more minute left.
Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application for the Winter Wonderland and Ice Rink in Colchester. Over the last year, since the first talk of this event, we have been working with the council's specialist teams, including parks, parking, transport, town centre management, planning, and then with Environmental Health and Historic England to develop a plan that works not only for commercial level for us as a promoter, but importantly to ensure that Colchester can benefit and also that any disruption for local residents is minimised. We are aware of the significance of the town centre location from a historic perspective, but also as the home of residents close to the site. Following detailed discussions with Environmental Health, the design and layout of the site has been changed to ensure that potential sound and smells are kept to a minimum, and we are happy to work within the suggested site noise levels of 55 dBA. This should prevent residents being adversely affected. The proposed opening hours are until 10 p.m, and by closing the park entrances to allow entry only from the High Street at dusk, we hope that any disruptions to the residents who back onto the other entrances of the park will be kept to a minimum. Also, although the final operational details are still being worked out, a detailed transport plan and parking plan will be put in place to ensure that residents and non-residents are parking in the best possible place to avoid disruption. Much discussing and planning work has gone into the design element of the site, ensuring that we sit comfortably in the grounds of the castle without casting lasting damage. As part of the planning process, we have moved various structures around to avoid possible historic artefacts, and as part of the work with Historic England, we have agreed to a high level of ground protection on the site. Finally, I believe this event can bring a real feel-good factor to Colchester this Christmas. So many people that I've spoken to have said Colchester has never had anything like this, and they always feel they have to travel to other parts of the country. No longer will this be the case. The town will have a real buzz about it, with visitors attracted to the event, and as well as the buzz, experience drawn from other towns suggests that trade in the towns may increase by at least 10 to 15% over the rink opening period. This will bring a wider benefit to the whole town from what's proposed in Castle Park. I hope as a planning committee you will be able to support the officer's positive recommendation for this application. I thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, Councillor Hayes, you get first shot of this as ward councillor if you wish it.
Oh, you mean as a member of the planning committee? I'm not a visiting councillor as well, as it were. Yeah, well, my concerns are that at the increasing commercialisation of the Castle Park, which is now proposed to be basically for half the winter, It's from the 26th of November until the 3rd of January. And while I can see that there are potential benefits to visitors and to adjacent traders, it seems to me it's another case. We've had also a similar situation with the big screen this summer, where there's a small benefit to a large number of people and a considerable detriment to a small number of local residents who can't get away because they're residents. And we've got along the back of Maidenborough Street, Reigate Road, there's residents all along there. There's a block of flats at the south side, which was converted a few years ago. And then there's the block of flats on the east side, which used to be a NHS clinic. And they're all quite close. And then slightly further away, there's Castle Road and Roman Road. And they've expressed their concerns. And I would ask my colleagues on the committee to, well, I'm going to find it difficult to vote in favour myself, although obviously I'm going to listen to what everyone's going to say, but I'm very concerned about the effect upon the residents.
Okay, I have Councillor Harris and then Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I sympathise with the ward councillor, of course, but my stance is slightly different in that I'm looking as to ways as that we can mitigate against what is an exciting project, against any adverse impact to residents there. So that's how I preface what I'm going to say next. But the first point I want to make, Chair, is really about my engineering background, because as an engineer for the railway, I was mandated on sites of scientific interest all over the country about stopping pollution. So I want to make sure that the generators that we use for this have a bund underneath them so that they will take at least 150% of any diesel spill of that tank. So we want to make sure that if the worst happens, we have a fish pond there. We have a site of a very strong heritage there. I want to make sure that the generators, I want to be assured, are guaranteed that they cannot spill, even in the worst possible circumstances. Even if 100% of the diesel goes onto it's got to go into something that captures it, and we mitigate against any disaster to our asset, which is the award-winning Castle Park. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is about and I've always raised queries about the timing of it, Chair, and that is, I've already asked questions of the hierarchy of the council, so I want to relay those now, that if we shut at 10 o'clock, how long, and this was a question I asked, how long does it take to clear the site? If it was 2, 3 and 4 hours, you can imagine my reaction to that and the reaction to the ward councillor. So, I've been assured, and I want to seek that assurance here in a public domain rather than a private domain, is that if it shuts at 10, how long will it take to clear, shut down, close up, and everything got away? And I was told it would be done and dusted by 10:15. Now, I want to guarantee that, but for those residents there, they will start to wind down at 9:45, shut at 10, and the site done, driven away, locked up, the gates locked, 10:15. Now, I think that's a challenge, because that's what I was told, but I was looking for reassurance to that, because I think that's wanted. My third point is about the timing. The bank holidays is 10 till 9, I think, at night. Christmas is a bank holiday. Boxing Day is a bank holiday. Are we saying, which I want clarification, that we're open on Christmas Day and Boxing Day and New Year's Day till 9 o'clock at night? Because if we are, I just want to know what the anticipated audience participation footfall is expected on those days, because that's something that I worry about, whether we're target and whether it's the right thing to do Christmas Day, Boxing Day and New Year's Day. I don't know. I'm just asking that question. And the last thing I wanted to make is about the point that my councillor colleague just said about the Reigate and the flats there. They are the closest, there's no doubt about that, and there will be an impact, and we have to do all we can to mitigate against that. So I'll be looking for some answers and as the debate goes to ensure that all their fears are mitigated against.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm excited by this application. I know we have to look very carefully at the implications for residents, but surely, as a town, we must try to use the facilities we have in a constructive way for the benefit of our residents. Yes, I'm sure there will be people who object, and I hope they are somewhat reassured by the conditions that we've had proposed to us. The one that concerned me was the noise from the generators. I do believe this has been recognised, and that the dampening down effect from the enclosed machine will help. There is the block of flats straight opposite, and that did concern me. But the condition requires that the operation will not start until it's been shown that the noise from these generators will be no more than 5 decibels above ambient. And I understand from the briefing that this will be considered at a quiet time of the night. As far as the other problems are concerned, I think the planning has been pretty extensive, and that I can't really see a problem other than parking, but we are told that the highways haven't objected. We can only tell, I'm afraid, that if there's a problem, unless we tried. It is spread over a long period, so there will be 1 or 2 peaks, no doubt, but there will be ample opportunity for people to go to it spread over a long period, which should help the car parking, I think. I understand what the 2 councillors have said already, but I think I would like to propose that we accept the recommendation, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor McLean, then I'm going to ask Alistair Day to come back.
Thank you, Chair. It's very innovative, and I think it's well thought out, and there has been a lot of work gone into this, and it's going to be a real good feel-good factor to Colchester for a lot of people, maybe not all of them, but that's, you know, unfortunate for the local residents. But hopefully, you know, there will be people who respect that and, you know, be good-naturedly over it, and, you know, hopefully won't have too much disruption. My only issue is, if there is a problem, where do they go? I mean, is there going to be an officer on site, you know, or contactable that they can always be on the end of a phone? I mean, someone's obviously going to have to shut the gates at night for security reasons. You know, to safeguard the residents, you know, will they have a number they can call just for security and for, you know, just checking everything's okay, and for, you know, noise and things?
Mr. Day.
Thank you, Chairman. Officers are very conscious both of the public benefits that the proposal has to the town at large and for the needs of local residents in terms of safeguarding their private amenity, particularly during the evenings. The application has been subject to sort of lengthy discussions with the applicant itself, himself, and with the environmental control team and other teams within the council. And officers feel that the proposed conditions that limit the amplified music to the 55 decibels at the boundary, the requirement not to have games audible from the boundary, and the new condition in relation to the generators should be sufficient to safeguard the amenity of local residents from noise and disturbance during the operation of the event. With regard to Councillor Harris raised a number of points. In terms of hours of operation, there's a condition at the moment that talks about the hours of use. It's not specific in terms of clearing away from the site, and if that is a concern to members, then that condition could be amended to require the site to be vacated fully by a certain time. 15 minutes does seem very quick. I'd have thought half an hour would be more reasonable in terms of ensuring all visitors are removed or are vacate the site, and the site is properly locked up following the sort of final sort of public use of the event. Issue of diesel spillage was raised. All the equipment in terms of generators and oil storage is modern equipment and comes with fitted spillage trays, etc., to avoid the potential for diesel sort of spilling off and causing pollution problems. So we feel that that is covered. Public holidays, again, the condition doesn't explicitly exclude any days. If members wanted, then you could specifically exclude Christmas as a day when the event should not operate. However, Boxing Day and New Year's Day, lots of town centres are open and activities operate, so it would seem reasonable for a function of this to operate during those two days. The issue of helpline, or where do residents go if they do have concerns, was mentioned. And that's something that the Castle Road Residents Association have particularly raised. And they note, although they made comments on the application, they don't object per se. And I think they've taken a fairly pragmatic view in terms of saying, if the Winter Wonderland has become an established event, then it's important that there are controls in place. And something they've suggested is that there is a point of contact for local residents should concerns be raised regarding noise and disturbance. We've spoken to the Environmental Control, and they've suggested that residents would contact the customer helpline and that they put through any complaints to their dedicated email contacts, and that's monitored on a sort of daily basis, and they could respond immediately to concerns of residents. Environmental Control have also suggested that they would be doing sort of measurements during the course of the event to ensure that the requirements in terms of the noise levels is maintained at the required in accordance with the conditions, etc. So it'll be monitored at an ad hoc basis by Environmental Control, and then obviously residents can have the opportunity to contact the council direct should there be a particular issue. I think I've picked up on the points that have raised by members. Thank you.
Okay, I have two more councillors. Just before, did I miss the clarification they would be able to close within 15 minutes?
The closure has never been raised as an issue by anybody specifically. What I noted that there was a condition that required the hours of operation to stop at 10 o'clock. I felt 15 minutes did seem very tight, but if members are minded to want the site cleared within a certain time frame, then a condition could be amended accordingly. But I think 15 minutes does seem very tight. I would have thought half an hour would be more reasonable in order to ensure all visitors are off and the site is properly locked up and secured.
Okay, I've got Councillor Moore, Councillor McLean, and then Councillor Scott-Patel.
Thank you. I've just got three questions. One is alcohol being served here other than something fairly mild? That's one question. The other is I have no idea how loud 55 decibels. We're taking it on sort of trust that that's an acceptable sound. Have we got any way of judging what it's actually going to sound like, 55 decibels? And the other question is the helpline, or whatever it is, whatever you like to call it, for people to ring if there is a problem. Will it be open in the evenings when people are likely to be thoroughly fed up with what's going on if it's a nuisance? So will there be somebody to answer then? Thank you.
I'll endeavour to answer the first one. In terms of alcohol being served, it will be governed by the licensing restrictions that the Castle Park already has, and I believe they're allowed to serve alcohol. I don't know specifically whether alcohol is intended to be served. The plans that all show food stall and coffee huts, it doesn't specifically mention alcohol for consumption on the premises, but it will be governed by the council's licensing procedures in that sense. I'll pass you across to my colleague Sam Riley, who will be able to explain the noise levels of 55 and the process for residents sort of contacting the council if there is an issue.
I can't really explain to you what 55 is, but it would be sort of a low murmur in like an office environment rather than, say, the peace and quiet of the countryside, which you would get about 25 to 30 decibels. So just to give you a rough sort of idea. We don't have a 24-hour service, so there won't be someone constantly there to respond to calls while the event would be running. But what we would do is be involved in the setup and the monitoring thereafter, sporadically. It wouldn't be permanently. But what we would want is if residents are affected, for them to call helpline in the evening. On a Friday and Saturday night, we have the out-of-hours noise service from 9 at night, so they could respond on that. And if residents complain during the day, we can respond obviously during the day, during weekdays. And if we get a complaint from a night time, then obviously we'll respond the next day. We haven't wanted to appoint a specific officer due to someone going on leave or sick or anything like that. So we're using our environmental protection email for contact centre, which we check. We have a duty officer on every day and we check it periodically throughout the day, but it is several times, so that we can respond directly to residents.
Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to second Councillor Chillingworth's proposal with the condition of Christmas Day and the clearing away of the site by 10:30. And if the environment is going to be on call 24 hours a day on the end of a phone, I know in my personal use with them for various other residents' work that they are responsive and they are very good. So I would have confidence in that, so I'll second it.
Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Chillingworth?
Yes.
Councillor Scott Patel.
It's just for clarification, you're talking about altering the condition about the hours of operation. Would the condition change for it to be operating longer to accommodate the people leaving and closing up the site? Or is the hours of operation going to be, what way would it be sort of altered for that to be taken into account, really? Just for clarification, please.
At the moment, the condition states that the site shall not be open to customers outside 10 till 10. That would need to be amended to say it should not be open to customers 10 till 10 and the site cleared and closed by 10:30, and it shall not open on Christmas Day. I'm not quite sure quite of the wording, but that's the essence of the proposed condition or the amended condition.
Okay, I have no more speakers. I do have a proposal on the table. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favour.
All those against?
That's 1 against.
Thank you for that. Can I just double check so I make sure I get the decision right? It's the amended condition 9 to take in Christmas Day and the clearance of the site. Obviously, you've got the additional condition regarding noise levels from the generator that we'll put, so it's 5 dB at the boundary. And then there's obviously the typo in condition 13 that needs to be changed. So that's all those, yeah.
Okay, we now move on to item 7.2. and this has Mr. Russell to present. If we allow people to just clear the room.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening members, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, before you an application for a biogas digester at Fairfields Farm in Wormingford. The proposal is for a biogas digester which will create 1.2 megawatts of energy, which is the equivalent to approximately 3,200 homes. The site itself is before you, the red triangle there, and it's a rural location in the parish of Wormingford, actually physically between Wormingford, Fordham and Mount Bures. And there it is, the aerial photograph you see, it's a very rural landscape. Without the red triangle, there we have it. The proposal site just on the left there shows the main development site, and just to the east of it is a proposed lagoon. Just moving in a bit closer, you get more of a feel of the site. And I've brought you out a little bit here just to demonstrate that there are 3 listed buildings which are quite nearby. The nearest is just here. That's Jenkins Farmhouse, a grade 2 star listed building. Similarly, down here is Rochford's, which is also 2 star. And here is a grade 2 agricultural barn building whose name I could not find for you, but it's another listed building. Also of consideration is the nearby network of footpaths, which I've got here in pink. Unfortunately, the top of the oops. Let's go back to the top isn't showing, but basically one does go along the top of the site. For your information, as you've probably seen by the shape of the site, it's a former airfield, as shown here, and it's one of the very rare First World War, as well as Second World War airfields. This is from 1946. Looking at the site itself, we're coming in from the north here. Just here is a long view of the agricultural buildings, so that's obviously an exposed aspect. Moving down past the gliding club, the site itself is actually just down there. And moving towards it, we're now getting to the setting of Jenkins, the farmhouse, which was an important consideration. It's over here on the left. You can just see buildings which are next to it. This is pretty much opposite the memorial for the servicemen, and also it's the nearest point of Jenkins to the site itself. Coming from the south, we get a long view again of the site, and you'll see here the agriculture buildings there. Moving in closer past Packard's Lane, and nearer to the site itself on the left. Within the site, a substantial part of it is already laid down to hard standing, involved with the crisp manufacturing business. And then moving on to the field itself, where the site would be. This is the main aspect, really, from within the site, looking back towards the main area where you would see the plant. And this is looking back away from the site, north across the Rochford's Plateau. To look at the proposal itself, it fits snugly more or less into this corner of the field, as you can see here. And the site of it is 2.9 hectares. Looking at the elements of the proposal itself, it's dominated by the silage clamps, which are these big structures here. This drag along here is roughly 200 metres, and along here you're looking at between probably about 80 metres roughly. These silage clamps are to be 4 metres high, and they would hold the whole crop, which is ready for the biodigestion process, and is then taken by a hopper to just here, to the primary digester. Originally there were 2 domed digesters, but through negotiation and amendment, this main digester is now to be flat, and therefore won't house any gas. The gas will all be in the domed gas store over here. And in terms of heights, we're looking at about 6 here, and nearer to 7 here. In terms of the landscape of the buildings, it's a long spread of buildings. We're looking more or less north to south here. From left to right, you can see the clamp, then the first tank, digester rather, then the second digester, and the surface water tank to the right, with various other bits and pieces along the way. So just to clarify the heights, the red line obviously being the ground level, you've got 4 metres there for the clamps, 6 metres for the digester, the main digester. Some of the items are a bit higher. As you can see, the heat process is here. That's just about over 10 metres, but obviously it's quite thin. And the flare as well, which is about almost 10 metres as well. The second digester, the gas store, as you can see, is about 7 metres, and it's sunk some way into the ground as well. Oops. And the surface water tank over here is about 6 metres. This is quite helpful drawing from the applicants to show the development in situ, and also of note here, in response to concerns about the setting of the listed building Jenkins, which is just there, it's proposed to have a woodland copse here, which is that view from the north and from the gliding club. That would fill out the horizon there. Similarly, there's some extra planting here. And also a thick woodland belt here. And the idea there is that the listed building and the development would never be read together, and therefore the setting of the listed building is preserved. And just to clarify also that there'll be some other planting along the way, which has been proposed on the drawing that you see there. That's all for now, Chair. I'll answer any questions, obviously, that arise during the debate.
If I could call Mr. Cowan first, please. You'll have 3 minutes from the time you press the button. Bell will go at 2 to let you know you've got 1 more minute remaining.
Thank you. Have we started? Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I am the owner-occupier of Rochfords in Fordham Road, which is approximately 500 metres from the proposed development. I care deeply about the countryside, and over the last 25 years I have witnessed and tried to resist the creeping industrialisation of the corner of North Essex, represented by Wormingford and Fordham. It was reassuring, therefore, to read that both the historic buildings officer and the urban designer for the council recommended refusal of the original plans based on this industrial development harming the countryside and listed buildings respectively. To quote the urban designer, the proposal represents a significant increase in built massing within the countryside, with predominantly structures in nature that would be difficult to mitigate through building and structure design. Despite this view, the amendments which have reduced the height a little and altered the profile from 2 domes to 1 have readily satisfied this expert, but this does not escape the observation that this would still be a sprawling industrial development occupying 2.9 hectares on an historically relevant farmland plateau overlooking the Stour Valley. Likewise, the Historic Buildings Officer has been satisfied by the proposed plantings of a copse and a woodland belt, suggested to make this development, as it were, disappear in the rural setting, which only serves to indicate its inappropriateness in the proposed location. I suggest also there are unresolved questions surrounding the delivery of crops specifically grown for this digester using narrow and tortuous country roads. The provision of 22,000 tonnes per annum of crops, including the contentious use of maize, require contributions from a number of local farms, and this produces traffic issues. Now, I am generally supportive of renewable energy products, but not just anywhere and at any cost to the community and the landscape. In this case, the residents of Wormingford will not benefit from the gas produced, And they might also be obliged to live with the odour arising from the movement of silage on a daily basis and for up to 2 hours at a time, blown across our homes and gardens by the prevailing wind, which is towards Wormingford. The observations of the Environmental Control Officer on the subject of odour are hardly convincing based on a single visit to another biogas digester site. This project appears primarily to benefit the applicant, while the details of the application have been, in my view, massaged to suit the MPPF by believing against all reasonable thought that the cumulative landscape and visual impacts have been satisfied as required in paragraph 97 of the MPPF. Ladies and gentlemen, I respect you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much. If you could press the button, turn it off. Could I now call Robert Strathern? Same rules apply. You'll have 3 minutes. The bell will go at 2.
Good evening all. I'm Robert Strathern, applicant for the proposed biogas digester at Wormingford Airfield. I live in Wormingford with my family and we've been farming in Colchester since 1930. The application is for a farm diversification project. The project will bring numerous benefits to our farm, increase local employment and improve climate change and conservation. The project will produce renewable gas to supply energy to 3,200 homes and reduced carbon production by 8,000 tonnes per annum. The airfield is an ideal site for this project based on its network of existing tracks and the presence of a gas pipeline running through the farm. Extensive work has been carried out by our consultants in respect of landscaping and designing the project to ensure that there is no impact on neighbouring residential amenity and nearby heritage assets. As a result of the biogas plant, the amount of lorry movements will reduce considerably. The project enables us to grow crops of whole crop maize and rye, which will lead to a more sustainable farming rotation. This will improve soil structure and enhance wildlife habitats throughout the farm. The organic digestate produced will provide the farm with a fantastic fertiliser. Also, electricity produced will serve the requirements of the farm. As a business, we employ around 30 people, many of whom are local, and this project will provide additional employment for 5 full-time staff and 1 apprentice. As we already do with our crisp business, we will carry out educational work with this project. This will include visits from schools and local community groups. We firmly believe the future of farming will be about combining a balance of sustainable food production whilst responding to the realities of our country's energy demands. It will also reduce our dependence on gas imported from abroad. I believe we have addressed all aspects of this project correctly, but to summarise, we have satisfied the core government policy principles as set out in the National Policy Framework. We have received the support of the 2 most local parish councils, received several letters of support from local residents, ensured traffic movements to the site will be reduced, confirmed odour will not be an issue and verified by an approved ADAS odour specialist and satisfied environmental health. We have also visited 2 local approved AD sites with both environmental health and local parish councils. We've ensured no impact on local heritage assets and provided an extensive and robust landscape plan compiled by an approved professional. I live on the doorstep of this project and I will live on the farm and be part of the local community for the rest of my career. I hope that is a useful insight and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much and very well timed. Now call upon Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. It's really a list of observations, if I may, please. Just to emphasise the fact that, as Mr Strathern said, Fordham Parish Council, which is very close to this area as well, is also happily accepting what's proposed there. As Dr Cowan said, Wormingford, by its very nature, I'm afraid, with the airfield there, is quite challenged with developments going on. And I think that is an issue which I'm afraid they have to live with. It does lend itself to those sorts of developments going on, and there are a number in that area, and it is an unfortunate thing. But I think that it has to be accepted that is an ideal site for these things to happen. it is a difficult site, I understand that. It is a Rochford plain. It is high. It is overlooks the Store Valley, and it's obviously visible from other aspects. But I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think the mitigation of the tree planting, that sort of thing, will cover that in due course. I wanted to commend the report. I thought it was very well written and argued through, and I did follow it very closely. But I was concerned by the number of renegotiation that kept coming back, and it is an issue for the local residents, I think, to follow what's going on. I don't know what the answer is on that, but it is a difficult thing because they need to keep on looking at the website to understand what's going on. And with they see the original application, then these renegotiated points, it does cause confusion. And as I say, I don't know what the answer is, but it's something that may be worth considering how we can best get those over to local residents, because it is worth doing that. There's some mitigation going on, and it's worth recording that and getting people to understand that. And the final point I think I really wanted to make was I wanted to get insurance about the planting of the mitigation. We do see these sites where trees and that sort of thing are planted, lovely planting, all protected from rabbits and all this sort of thing, but actually nobody bothers to water them. They die and never replaced. I can see it is a 5-year plan on this condition, but I do need to be reassured that somebody will be going out checking that this planting is growing, is going to take, and it will provide that protection in the future. If it is left to just to take its course, and I do fear that the cover will disappear, and that will detract, I think, from the whole project. So it's a lot of planting going on there, and I do think it needs to be looked after. As I say, I'd like to know how that can be achieved, please. And that's my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to let Mr. Russell come back. Then I have Councillor Chillingworth, then Councillor Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer most of those points, and then for one of them, I'll defer to my colleague Sam Riley from Environmental Control. Dr. Cowan raised the point of creeping industrialisation, sprawling development, and that is sympathised with as a fear, and I totally understand why. It's a lovely part of the world, and we don't want to ruin it, I assure you. The mitigation that we've got from this, I think, will do a lot to enhance the area from some aspects. In terms of the point that if you make it disappear, then it must be something wrong with it to start with. I understand what you're trying to say there, but if the MPPF does actually say for projects such as these, we should approve them. We should approve them if its impacts are or can be made acceptable, and that's what we've done here. We've made the impacts acceptable. In terms of the concerns about roads and delivery, etc., we've heard from the applicant that the whole crops are to be grown on site. Frankly, we can't dictate that's going to be the case, and I wouldn't like to impose a condition saying that no crops can be brought onto site. But that is certainly the intention. So therefore, there shouldn't be much in the way of traffic. And also, we must remember the Highway Authority hasn't objected at all, so that's to be said. 2 points were made which Sam will have to answer, which were first one about odour from silage and the second about basing the judgment on a single visit. I'll now defer to Sam Riley.
Thank you. I did only go to the Elmstead Market site once. At the time of the visit, the face of the clamp was open, and once it has been opened, it remains open. And the smell from the silage was not detectable until we were within a few metres of it, and it certainly wasn't detectable from around the farm buildings or further away. I also consulted with the authority within whose area that came, and they've not received any complaints. I also consulted with North Norfolk, who have 2 existing sites that use crops, and they haven't had complaints regarding odour from those sites. It would appear from some of the research that I've done that the more odorous products, such as pig slurry, are the ones that have generated complaints. When we were at the site, they were loading the hopper, and there was no odour coming from the site. What was the other point?
Yeah, thank you. And to answer the points raised by Councillor Chapman about the renegotiation being difficult to follow, I sympathise with that as well, because the website has got lots of information on it. And on this occasion, there were 2 amendments in short measure, about one a week after the other, so I understand there would have been a bit of confusion. Hopefully, however, the letter sent with the second set was crystal clear, and it did state exactly which documents to look at, dated from 13th July, I think is what it said, so hopefully that was clear at least. In terms of, I'll just show you what the change was, just to make it crystal clear, and this is why we shouldn't feel too bad about the fact that there's a slight shortness of timetable to answer in terms of the committee report being written first. This was the original, that was the original proposal, and you can see that the top of each dome is about, working out, one was 12.5, one was 13, I think. And what we did was actually bring it down to that, so go from one to the other. You see it's quite a drop there, and if you map one on front of the other, you see that the black there is what we got now, and the light grey is what we had before. So that was a negotiation that we made. That was the improvement we got in that last amendment. So that's why I don't feel that anybody was disadvantaged anyway. That was the change that was made. So it's for the good, basically. In terms of the planting works, Councillor Chapman raised that point. Adam John, our landscape planner, that's his job, basically. We get an agreed scheme in. He goes around and checks them at the relevant times of year to make sure they've been done properly. And you can be quite sure that if you haven't done it properly, he'll let you know. And generally speaking, developers make sure they do it properly. If they don't, they do it after warning. If they don't, then we have to start getting the enforcement people out. So it is looked after, I assure you.
Okay, we're going to open it up to the committee now with Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent Great Tay Ward, which adjoins this one, which includes Mount Bures, whose boundary comes to the north side of the airfield. I attended the parish council meeting where they discussed this. 2 of their members had been to the Suffolk installation and were very impressed with how it was working and the minimum effect it had on the environment. We've also heard from others tonight about the one at Elmstead. Chairman, the countryside is changing. It's changed throughout history. I remember when the airfield was built in 43, when one of my earliest memories was huge earth movers destroying the countryside for obvious good reasons. But since then, the airfield has been used for gliders and it's been used for agriculture. I say the world is changing. We must bring in ways of stopping the amount of fossil fuel that we are now burning. This is a small step in that direction, and it complies directly, I think, with the aspirations of the National Planning Policy Framework and our own policies on this sort of aspect. Obviously, those policies require mitigation if there are problems. The main problem here, as far as I can see, is on the landscape. The buildings themselves will be hidden to a great extent from the local houses by the existing buildings and the planting which either exists or will be planted shortly. Our visit, to my mind, clarified that the 2 listed properties will not be seriously affected by this proposal. As far as odour is concerned, I know very well that silage itself, it's a green crop which is delivered 3 times during the season as fresh crop, and there's no smell at that stage. Silage, when it's cut, produces a sweet smell. It isn't an obnoxious smell. It is far less so than, for instance, a pig unit or even a cattle unit, which could be built in the countryside. those who live in the countryside, I think, should accept countryside activities. This is a farm-based operation, growing energy crops from the land. Many crops these days are grown for energy and not just for food or for other reasons like pharmaceuticals. There is no control over that, quite rightly in my view. It's only a one-year crop, which may actually help the following crop through rotation. Chairman, I don't think there is a reason for refusal, and I would therefore like to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Councillor Hazel, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Russell mentioned a lagoon. I just wondered for what purpose and what will be in the lagoon.
I said lagoon, that was the wrong word. It's basically a holding pond for rainwater, for fresh water.
Councillor Lilly, and then I have Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an application that we should all be behind. I think this is the future of this country. It's green issues. I think Councillor Chillingworth had it right, but when the airfield was built in the war for the greater good, to fight that, they ripped down everything and built huge hangars that were there. People accepted it. All we're doing now is they're building these little smaller hangars, but this is renewable energy, which is what we want in this country. We have to start somewhere, and this is a good start. I'm sure in the future that it will be downsized. Some clever person will make it smaller and better. But I think this is a really terrific idea. Odours in the countryside. Every year since I was a kid, the farmers over Fingrenow have sprayed all their fields with liquid manure, and the wind has blown over everywhere, and we put up with it because it's part of the countryside and it's there. The people of Old Heath have to put up with the sewage farm every year. You want to smell that? That's the most disgusting thing ever. So, but this is good. This is great, and we should all be behind this. So I will be supporting that, and I'll be seconding the proposal.
Thank you. Now we have... Oh, we got another speaker. We've got Councillor Hayes and Councillor Moore.
I was on the site visit, and yes, the plateau is beautiful, but although I haven't checked the old maps, the old ordnance survey and so on, I'm pretty sure that in the past that plateau would have had many more hedges and many more trees. It would not have been an open plateau as it now is. Its modern farming methods have changed the look of it very considerably. I'm heritage champion for the borough, and I was initially concerned at the stated risk to grade 2-star listed buildings, but in fact the nearest one is quite a considerable distance away, and there has been a real effort by the officers and the applicant to agree screening. What I would like to see is some sort of assurance in the in conditions that screening is not only planted but also maintained and, if necessary, replaced. And I would very much hope that it's going to be large trees which in the over time are going to have many benefits to the environment as well as screening. But subject to those comments, I think that there's such a national interest in having energy security, and this does send us a little way towards that. And bearing in mind that it is a former airfield, it's not entirely sort of virgin countryside. It also isn't in the area of outstanding natural beauty. So I propose to support it.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I also would support this, but I would ask, please, can we have the archaeology condition beefed up a bit? It is a plateau site. It's probably got both Iron Age and Anglo-Saxon stuff there, as well as the airfield. Could we just make sure that it says here, evaluation by consent? Could we beef it up a little bit so that a really good look is taken when the digging starts?
So, sorry, could Councillor Moore explain exactly how that would be beefed up? I'm sure we can do it, but just clarification how that should be done.
Well, it says by consent. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. I mean, if we were digging up the high street, they'd be, would be taken very seriously. But this is on face value just a bit of open countryside, and I say there could well be some quite interesting stuff there, if ephemeral, but not only that, there could be quite a lot of stuff left over from the World War I airfield stuff. Things. I'd just like to be sure it wasn't swept through rather quickly. Thank you.
The submission by the applicant will have to pass the guidelines which all archaeologists sign up to, basically. So it'll be done in a proper way.
Thank you. That's all I have from councillors at the moment. I am going to support this. I do agree with Councillor Moore about the archaeology could be extremely important here. World War I airfields are certainly ones you can dig are probably quite a rarity. And to get the opportunity to do it, it would be a shame if that wasn't taken to its nth term. So I would like to see that done. However, I accept what Mr. Russell's saying, that there is a set pattern of doing it and we have to leave it to the archaeological experts to do it. Green energy is always, or should always be one of the top of our agenda. It is vital, otherwise we won't leave much of a world for our children. The one question I would have would be the retained hedge. Is it retained? Because I'd hate to see that. It's quite a mature, I mean, yes, it's not the greatest hedge in Christendom, but it's quite a nice size. It's quite good at screening, and I would hate to see that taken out in order for a few little saplings to be put in to grow in the next 20 years. And also, is it going to be maintained with regards to if parts of it die because of some of this development, will it have to be replaced?
It's my understanding that the hedge will be retained. So it doesn't explicitly say that anywhere, so I think you're right to raise that, and we can either add it to the existing landscaping condition or have a separate condition saying this hedge shall be retained, and it should be subject to the same maintenance regime as the planting.
I think I would actually like to see a separate condition pointing out that actually that hedge needs to stay.
Yep, that's fine.
And that it has to be maintained as part of the...
Condition 19, that's fine, yeah.
Wider landscaping. If that's okay with... was it Councillor Chillingworth that proposed it? It was Councillor Chillingworth that proposed it. Is that okay with you, Councillor Chillingworth? Are there any other speakers? Okay, we have a proposal, we have it seconded. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. That completes that item. We now move on to item 7.3. It will be Sue Jackson to present.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the majority of the committee will be familiar with this site, having dealt with a application last year and also carried out a site visit earlier this afternoon. I think the first point to stress is that this is a resubmission of the earlier application that was refused planning permission. That application was the subject of the delayed decision protocol so that members could fully consider appropriate reasons for refusal. And at the earlier meetings, there was a lot of discussion about the issues raised in respect of flooding and surface water drainage. But members resolved to refuse planning permission solely on the grounds of the impact on the amenity of the adjoining residents. And this application has been submitted to overcome that sole reason for refusal. So whilst the original application was for a dwelling that was a storey and a half, the resubmission to overcome that height is for the submission of a two-bedroom bungalow. You can see the application site within the residential area of Queen's Road at Wivenhoe. The area to the west side of Queen's Road, adjacent to the site, is within the conservation area, but the land on the north side of the road, opposite the site, is outside the conservation area, although the pump house that you can see on the plan in front of you is on the local list, as is the Queen's Road vista, and the town drain, which runs along the west boundary of the site and leads through to the River Colne and extends northwards through the village of Wivenhoe. This shows the footprint of the proposed bungalow, as I say, a two-bed bungalow, a garden area of 78 square metres, which meets the council's standard for a two-bedroom property, which is 50 square metres, 2 parking spaces proposed adjacent to the property. And you can also see by the dotted line the footprint of the dwelling that formed part of the original earlier application. And here again the street scene shows the proposed bungalow in relation to number 56 Queen's Road, which is the last property within the conservation area, Victorian dwelling, and to the left-hand side, the more modern bungalow with other more recent properties in Paget Road. And you also see the outline of the height of the earlier proposal, so obviously a significant reduction in the height of the property. Members will recall there was substantial discussion at the earlier planning committee in respect of flooding issues and surface water drainage, and this application proposes exactly the same proposals in terms of a raised floor level and a void underneath the building where surface water can collect, so there's no displacement in terms of floodplain. Other issues that were raised at that time related to historic lack of maintenance to the town drain and to the highway surface water drainage. Obviously that situation won't change as part of this application. Maintenance will or will not take place irrespective of whether there's a dwelling on the site. The third issue obviously relates to the safety of residents, and with the raised slab level, the Environment Agency has confirmed there will be safe access and egress for the residents of the property. What we're recommending is that the application is deferred for a legal agreement to secure the maintenance of the void under the building, and also for ongoing responsibility for that maintenance to form part of the legal agreement. This slide shows the front elevation of the bungalow, traditionally designed with a slate roof, red brick. You can see the void and the trash screens on the front elevation, and perhaps in slightly larger scale the footprint of the previous proposal. And finally the 4 elevations of the proposed property. This is a photograph looking into the site from Queen's Road. You can see the adjoining property at the rear of the site in Paget Road, and a slight view of the number 58 Queen's Road, also in the applicant's ownership. And again, looking towards Paget Road and Queen's Road from the site frontage. And again, looking, you can see the full width of the site and the screening along the rear boundary. And finally, the photographs show the changing character along Queen's Road. At the top end, you've got more modern development bungalows, and as you look up Queen's Road towards the High Street direction, you can see the Victorian terraced and semi-detached properties. And this is looking down Queen's Road. Again, you can see the changing character. And again, looking towards the site, you can see the Victorian properties at the top end of the photograph, then the gap where the site is, and then the bungalows at the far end of Queen's Road. And finally, back to the elevations. As I say, the recommendation is to approve this resubmission, which is considered to overcome the earlier reason for refusal, subject to the legal agreement to secure the maintenance of the void and responsibility for ongoing maintenance. Thank you.
Could I call Chris Singleton, please? You've seen how it's done. 3 minutes from the time you press the button, there will be a bell at 2.
Councillors, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to represent the Queen's Road Residents Association. I would first want to orientate the committee to the fact that this application in the former rear garden of number 58, albeit in slightly altered formats, has been going through this process since 2008. Each iteration has faced strong objection by the residents, not least because we know it floods. This is not in question. It is a fact where photo evidence can be found on the association's blog site. The same or similar application is currently subject to an appeal in its older, larger format, which was rejected by this committee on the grounds of being overbearing. I would like to refocus the committee on some of the other serious points that have remained true throughout this long, drawn-out saga. The site is known to flood. The risk is partially reduced when the surface drainage is kept clear and also when the town drain is kept clear. The developer proposes a void to handle the flooding, but it is still dependent on the surface and town drains being kept in good repair. His willingness to enter a maintenance schedule through the planning conditions will be passed on to the new owner. Is this a reasonable expectation or shortcoming of the building? A building of this construction with mitigation may need piling, and the detrimental effects on houses in the close area could be severe. The effects to the substrata groundwater is also unknown. I'd like to tell you that the site opposite is also known as the pump house for good reason. Both the Environment Agency and Highways have consented, but with heavy caveats which pass the buck of risk to this committee. The Environment Agency continues to recognise the unknowns, but says the risk appraisal is not theirs to make, it's yours, an easy opt-out. With these points in mind, I would like to pose a question that if you agree to the planning conditions for the void, how can you impose planning conditions on both the Environment Agency and the Highways Agency to maintain the efficacy of the drainage? Sufficient flood mitigation is on the premise of all three working together. The only onus and condition will be on the new owner of the house to maintain the void. The town drain is currently overgrown and the surface drainage is unknown. It is likely any future property on this site will be more difficult to insure, or at least attract a disproportionately high premium to the house value. With the complex planning conditions in place in future, any claims are likely to include counterclaims to the agencies if they haven't managed to keep it clear. These are foreseeable issues of sustainability of the proposed property. For the sake of a single dwelling house in a former rear garden which has acted as a microplane for many years, is granting permission worth the risk? The association still maintains that the building is not in keeping with the area, but this opinion is not shared by the planning officer. The application does not comply with the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan Vision and Objective Statement. As a final point, the committee members may wish to look at the recent photos of the stag beetles in flight on Queen's Road.
Thank you. I hope you got most of what you needed to say in. Can I now call Mr. Sherwood, please? You'll have 3 minutes from the time you press the button.
Good evening, members of the committee. I am a Wivenhoe resident trying to run a small business building company, and one of the owners of the site. I thought the time was right to personally speak out about this proposal. We bought this site approximately 7 years ago. We have since fully renovated the site and the rundown bungalow. From day one of speaking to the planning department, we were given very positive feedback and told it was an infill plot that would improve the Queen's Road vista. We then asked if we could apply for planning subject to a flood report and were told no. So we had an extensive flood report done at a cost of approximately £15,000, a huge amount for a single plot for a small builder. But at the end, we were happy as we had no objection from the EA. We also had no objection from the Highways Department or any of the other consultees. Our previous application was refused purely on the grounds of the proposed building being overbearing. This application for a bungalow, which is tiny compared to the previous scheme, this can be really appreciated by the street scene drawing. It has been designed to complement the transition from the Victorian houses on the west side to the more recent bungalows on the east side. All concerned were happy with the design. So tonight we have a situation where the planning officer, the historic buildings and areas officer, the planning project manager and the conservation officer have all visited the site and are happy with the proposal, saying that the scheme will actually improve the Queen's Road vista. Also, we have no objections from any of the consultees, and we have reduced the previous dwelling to a very small bungalow. We feel we have done everything asked of us and more. I hope tonight you will approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now call Councillor Liddy, who has 5 minutes, and the bell will go after 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members will have been told ad nauseum at the outset of each meeting that the Planning Committee is a quasi-judicial body that makes its decisions on the basis of planning legislation, case law, planning guidance, local plan, CBC's own planning policies, not to mention the Magna Carta. The important expression is quasi-judicial, as if a judicial body. It is important as it imposes on members an obligation to act reasonably in their decision-making. The professional officers may recommend a course of action, but it is for the members to exercise their own discretion and reach an appropriate decision. It is not unreasonable to contradict an officer's recommendation. Otherwise, why have a planning committee? Like Lazarus, 58 Queen's Road has been resurrected on a number of occasions, and it's been before this committee on a number of times. On this occasion, the applicants have done a considerable amount of work to answer objections and improve the scheme on offer. However, questions still remain, and they do undermine the validity of the application, the main one still being the risk of flooding to the property and its neighbours, not to mention the related issues. In November 2013, the Environment Agency withdrew its objection to the previous application. Nevertheless, the Environment Agency's comments on the subject are equivocal, to say the least. Comments such as, quote, whilst the site is not at risk from the River Colne, it remains at risk from fluvial Wivenhoe Town Drain, adjacent to the site, which is classified as a main river. The flood risk assessment has also identified the site to be at risk of pluvial, so that is to say surface water flooding, and has acknowledged that the proposed development will increase the permeable area. That does not exactly inspire confidence. It is clear that the Environment Agency has quite literally washed its hands of the problem in saying, we have no objection to the planning application, providing CBC is satisfied that the development would be safe in its lifetime, and you assess the acceptability of the issues within your remit, subject to the conditions below. It's hardly a ringing endorsement, and it also underlined Chris Singleton's point about the fact that the risk is being passed on to Colchester Borough Council. There also remain concerns over the proposed solution to the flooding, that of a void under the dwelling to allow floodwater to flow downstream. Here, the correspondence between the Environment Agency and local residents suggests that the Environment Agency is relatively unfamiliar with such schemes and that it is largely an experimental idea. The residents of Queen's Road should not be subject to an experiment. It has been suggested in the past that such schemes are widely used in the Netherlands, where part of the country is below sea level and behind polders. This may be appropriate for urban areas and large-scale housing developments, but no evidence has been brought forward to suggest in individual developments where neighbours may be adversely affected. The other issue that concerns me relating to the void is that of its maintenance. This will require work to be undertaken at least annually to ensure that the screens surrounding the void are kept clear of detritus. This is a considerable obligation on any householder and will require careful monitoring by the planning enforcement team. If the committee is minded to grant consent, then I would strongly urge the committee to impose a condition to require a substantial bond from the developer to ensure compliance. The question of the capacity of the town drain and surrounding pipes and culverts to cope with any inundation has also been raised. There is a long history of flooding in Queen's Road over many years. A number of agencies have been involved and none are prepared to take full responsibility for the problem. Each wishes to stay within its own statutory silo without regard for the problems caused to the long-suffering residents of Queen's Road. The officer's report correctly states that the failure of other agencies to comply with their own statutory obligations is not sufficient grounds to refuse planning consent. But this brings me neatly back to my opening remarks about reasonability. Planning law does not exist in a vacuum. It is here to guide us through the problems confronted by the real world. All laws have to give way to reality. The failure of various agencies to comply with their statutory obligations is a reasonable consideration. This application has been, like the poor, always with us. If granted, I can foresee numerous problems emerging between the occupier and the neighbours. As ward councillor, I do not wish to spend my time mediating between warring factions whilst pleading with CBC and other agencies to take action. So, to summarise, my three concerns are risk of flooding, void experiment.
Councillor Liddy, your time is up.
Thank you.
Good try, though. Okay, I'm going to ask Sue Jackson to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, a number of issues have been raised. I mean, in respect of the town drain, which is actually a river, and the highway surface water drainage, that is not the responsibility of the applicant. And as I've said in my report and mentioned by the visiting councillor, that's not a reason to refuse planning permission if those particular agencies aren't carrying out regular maintenance, or if they are, that situation will remain unchanged whether this development takes place or not. I think the issue is whether the proposed dwelling will have an adverse impact on the existing situation, and the floodplain which the garden currently acts as when the town drain overflows won't be reduced by this particular proposal, because any flood waters will go under the property itself, under the raised slab level, so that there will be no reduction in floodplain area, so no additional waters will result from the development into the town drain. And in respect of surface water drainage, what's being proposed is a holding tank or holding tanks, so there will be no rapid release of surface water into the town drain. It will be a monitored and controlled release of surface water. Obviously, the issues that we do have to take account of, which are referred to by the Environment Agency, are the safety of the residents themselves, and in this particular case, with the raised floor level, the residents or the occupants of the property won't be adversely affected should there be an occasion of flooding, and they do actually also have safe access and egress from the property in times of flood. What we're suggesting in terms of the legal agreement is that the maintenance programme has to be agreed with us, and my understanding is that it will be perhaps a biannual simple flushing out of the trash screens with a normal hose to remove any debris, so it's not going to be a particularly onerous or expensive maintenance required. Not going to put any unusual costs upon any occupier of the property. And obviously what we also need to be certain of is that it's known who's responsible for carrying out that maintenance as well, and that will also form part of the legal agreement. I think if the Environment Agency had any concerns about the proposal, they would be recommending refusal, whilst it may not be common in Essex to have this form of development. My understanding is it's not uncommon, particularly in the Norfolk Broads, to have this type of raised floor level with an area under the building where any floodwaters can go should that prove necessary. So I think it may be that it's something that the Environment Agency has got knowledge of in other parts of the country, and it's obviously satisfied that it's not going to cause an issue on this particular site. Otherwise, I'm sure they would be recommending refusal. Thank you.
Okay, first name down on there is me, as a neighbouring ward councillor. I kind of find myself partially agreeing with Councillor Liddy. Although, yes, I wouldn't agree with you, Councillor Liddy. I think this scheme is far better, and I think it has to be said this is far better than the two-storey one that was originally before us. The footprint, certainly, I think, would have less of an impact. The issue I have is it's on the top of page 62, and it says, this is from the Environment Agency, and it comes back to what Councillor Liddy said. We have no objection to the planning application, providing that you are satisfied that the development would be safe for its lifetime. Am I satisfied that it would be safe for the house's lifetime? Now, if you look along Queen's Road, there are houses there that are over 100 years old. Is this going to last 100 years? Do we go to other areas of the town that have houses that are 200, 300, maybe 400 years old? How can we look at that? We're actually having this environmental issue put upon us as a planning committee, and what I want, I think this might be one for Mr. Cairns to answer. If this were to all go wrong because of a flooding issue, now that the Environment Agency have said what they have said, and that it is down to us to be sure, who would be liable?
With regard to issues of liability, clearly we would have to seek legal advice, but certainly on the face of it, it appears to me that as long as the authority had been diligent in its consultations and had due regard to the comments of relevant consultees, and that there was no evidence to the contrary that this dwelling during its lifetime would suffer from adverse effects, it would appear to me that the flooding issue is somewhat a red herring, insofar as the proposed development will not exacerbate the flooding situation. The flooding situation, as we've heard, is an existing situation, and the proposed dwelling has been designed so that the residents of that dwelling should not be affected by the flooding. So I think, given that the dwelling will not exacerbate the flooding situation, and given that we have made careful provision for the safety of the residents, I can see no reason why we should be facing any risk of potential litigation. Clearly we haven't sought any legal opinion to clarify that, but common sense would appear to suggest that the flooding situation being an existing situation, and in the knowledge of that situation, the design has been designed to mitigate the effect both on the neighbourhood and upon the occupiers of the proposed dwelling. It would seem to me we are not actually adopting any risk. Clearly, any buyer of the site would be aware of the fact that the site has a history of flooding. We can impose an informative to that effect, and to that end, I think it is caveat emptor. We are not here to, and do not have the ability to predict how far climate change may affect any house in its lifetime. I mean, any house may be subject to changes or changes in the hydrological regime, or indeed changes in flooding, in the same way in which we often consider applications for development at East Mersey, where there could be implications of coastal inundation. We would not have due reason to reject those, for example, unless we had cause from any consultee that would suggest that we were taking a risky stance. Certainly, having regard to the fact that we are aware the site floods and that this dwelling will not exacerbate that flooding, and that the design has been designed having regard to all reasonable information available at the time, I don't personally see why we should be accepting any liability should circumstances change. Clearly, any buyer would be aware of the history of flooding and would be accepting that risk.
Okay, I have 4 more councillors to speak, and I shall probably come back when I've had a think about it. I've got Councillor Hazel, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Harris, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. When we visited the site the last time, I couldn't see much wrong with it then. And this is a definite improvement in regard to the size. I think it's a bit much to expect one householder to bear the sole responsibility for the flooding of everybody else. And I also think it's unreasonable to allow all those other agencies who should be clearing that the town drain and keeping it free should actually fall on that one householder. It was a back garden, and one wonders what kind of a back garden it could be if it was going to flood, or if it did flood in the manner in which we are told it does. I mean, it would seem to me totally unsustainable. I would like to hear what other colleagues are saying, but I have to say I do agree with Mr. Cairns also. We cannot guarantee the life of any building. Catastrophes strike buildings whenever they decide to do so. At the moment, I'm mindful to pass this application, but I would like to hear other colleagues' comments. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a matter of clarity in my mind, among which I've heard. The flooding doesn't matter whatsoever on this. It's just about the house being built on a piece of ground, is what I think what the officer was saying. It's not going to make the flooding worse. It's not going to make the flooding better. It's just that really it's all about what a house is built on there. And if we pass the application, we forget all about it, and it's down to the poor person who's going to live there, and hopefully clear out all the side drains and underneath, and hopefully they will do that constantly, so they won't suffer from damp and such. So it's a extremely strange one where we're going to build a house or bungalow in an area that we all acknowledge that it floods, and the environmental agency turn around and say, well, as long as you're happy or you're satisfied, we'll be happy, which is unusual for the environmental agency to say such things. It should be yes or no. So I'm not satisfied with what they've said. I'd prefer them turn around and say for definite that you cannot build a house on an area that floods. However, before the barrier was built, Row Edge used to flood the high street. Was always flooded. The houses down along the front there flooded. some places across the road flooded now and again, but that was quite good for us. But those houses are still going. They accepted, they lived there, and they lived there with sandbags and things. So if they want to build the house, if somebody wants to live in this house and they take on the maintenance, then surely it's up to that person who lives or buys that house and that. So it'd be unusual. It really would. But I don't think it would be for me, I'm afraid. And back to the main point, I'm not satisfied with it. I wasn't before, and I don't feel comfortable in voting something through that I know is going to live in a flooded area. So I think I'll wait for the other colleagues to hear what they have to say on this one.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the flooding is obviously clearly an issue, and it's something that is known about, and I'm disappointed with the Environmental Agency's comments on that. Just a question on condition 25. What do we mean by that, please? No work shall take place until a flood warning and evacuation plan has been submitted and approved. What does one look like? Are we putting something on the applicant that's reasonable or unreasonable? Is such a thing a reasonable thing, and is it a well-documented thing? The approved plan shall be implemented and remain in place. What place thereafter? I don't understand who holds it and who manages it and who looks after it. And then it says the reason is to ensure residents are adequately protected in times of flooding. Not possible flooding, flooding. So that's why I'm worried. It doesn't say possible flooding there or potential flooding. It seems that we know it's going to flood at some stage in the future.
Councillor Moore, then Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. In my experience, if an area floods, the problem is downstream. It's because the water can't get away, not that it's arriving in the first place. We've been told that it's the site itself and the building of the bungalow is not going to make it any worse. I looked into the town drain. There was a fair amount of water in it and it was stagnant. It is quite obvious that further downstream somebody who should be keeping it clear is not keeping it clear. I don't feel the applicant should be penalised, because if he is content to build on this site, and if he thinks he can sell it and that people will not mind the occasion, we haven't been told how deep this floods, whether it's 3 inches or 3 feet. If the applicant is content and he thinks he can sell this property, which has been designed not to suffer from what one assumes is a reason, well, I don't know how many inches we're talking about, then I think perhaps as a council we ought to be chasing up who is downstream, which is actually causing the build-up of water to back up there. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. I would say that the proposed dwelling is quite modest. I think it would fit in with the existing buildings along that road. The question of flooding certainly has been raised here and thrashed out. I think Councillor Hazel said that, you know, it's not the sole responsibility of the owner of this plot to be responsible for the drainage, and other agencies must get involved. I'm concerned about the comments by the Environment Agency, the fact that they would qualify their recommendations by putting the onus on us. And I think it would be reasonable for a note to go back to them to say that we did not think this was acceptable, and we wouldn't like to see it in their future recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
I note on page 63 in our agendas the Environment Agency's summary of flood risk responsibilities for your council, that is to say for this council. And it suggests that we should be considering a whole list of things, and the first one's the sequential test and the second one's the exception test. And as I understand it from elsewhere in the report, this site is within flood zones 2 and 3, which, if I remember rightly, means that it's not, I mean, flood zone 1 is land that's fine and okay from the flooding point of view. Flood zone 2 is not fine, and flood zone 3 is very much not fine. And if that's correct, then the sequential test, I would like to know when the sequential test applies and how it applies. And I also note on page 64 that the Environment Agency says, in all circumstances where warning and emergency response is fundamental to managing flood risk, we advise local planning authorities to formally consider the emergency planning and rescue implications of new development in making their decisions. Well, I don't know whether this is a circumstance where warning and emergency response is fundamental to managing flood risk. I hope it isn't, because I do not want this planning authority to be authorising development which in future years is going to mean that we've got emergency planning and rescue expenses. I mean, a couple of years ago there was a major scare at, I think it was Point Clear or Jaywick, which is not this local authority, it was an adjacent one, and a number of people had to be evacuated, and they spent the night in a Charter Hall, I think, at Leisure World here, and that's going to happen more and more often with sea levels rising, as we're told they are, and I feel unhappy about allowing this when we know it's not, when we know there's this flood risk, and I don't feel that we've really, I don't feel assured that the council is going to be free of future expense. I would hope that Mr. Cairns is correct that we've been diligent and we wouldn't actually be sort of sued for negligence for having permitted this. But I would like more guidance from the officers.
Okay, I've got Councillor Chillingworth next, and I'm going to ask the officers to respond before any councillors wishing to have a second go have a second go.
Chairman, these are déjà vu. We've been here before, haven't we? 4 months ago, 3 months, when we went through all this, and we were told very clearly that there was only one valid planning reason to refuse it. Although we were all unhappy about the situation, without the support of the consultees, we were on a loser, and we would possibly have costs against us if it went to appeal. The applicant, of course, has tried to mitigate the one refusal that we accepted last time, and I think he's done a good job. That bungalow in that situation, I think, is quite acceptable from a street scene and from our other policies. We've heard that it's an acceptable solution where there is fluvial flooding to have this void. There is no danger to life, I don't think. Even if this stream does flood, people could escape. They might lose their garden, and they also might lose some furniture. But I don't think we're talking about a risk to life here. So, on that basis, I am prepared to propose that we accept it. I may not be seconded, but I think that's what we should be doing as a planning committee on what we've heard tonight and the previous time we considered it.
Thank you, Councillor Chillingworth. Councillor Moore has seconded your proposal. I would like to hear back from Sue Jackson about the issues raised. Then Councillor Hazel has indicated to speak again, and I would also like to speak again. So there's I don't know if there's anyone else that would like to.
Thank you, Chairman. The condition 25 about the flood warning and evacuation plan is a fairly common condition, particularly in say, places like East Mersey, and normally what it involves is the applicant signing up to the Environment Agency's sort of advance warning of when flooding is predicted or heavy rainfall, which is really the situation in this case. We're not talking about flooding by the River Colne. It's the issue has arisen historically because the town drain, which then runs northwards through Wivenhoe, actually forming part of residents' rear boundary gardens, where those residents have riparian responsibilities to keep it clean, or to keep it clean from debris. And that hasn't always happened. And obviously, as you'll have seen at the site visit, this site is at the lowest point. So if maintenance isn't carried out further upstream, then it's this point where the water comes down the road, down Queen's Road, and added to the problems, you've got lack of maintenance from the Highway Authority in terms of clearing out the surface water drainage. So that is where the flooding is known to have taken place. In terms of the points that Councillor Hayes raised, that is dealt with within the committee report. In terms of the sequential test, because the area is subject to the strategic flood risk assessment as part of the local development framework, the sequential test doesn't apply. It's an allocated site. It's within a site that's actually shown allocated for residential purposes within the Wivenhoe village boundary. And then, so you then move on to the exception test, which says that if the site can be made safe for the residents of the property and doesn't increase flood risk, then the exception test is passed. And as I hope I've explained in answers to previous questions, those two elements are satisfied. It's not going to increase flood risk because of the void, so there's going to be no displacement of the surface water area. That's going to be going, the rainwater or the flood water can go under the building. And in terms of the safety of the residents, they are protected by the raised slab level and means of escape, satisfactory means of escape in terms of the egress and access from the property. We do have an in-house resilience officer who deals with conditions in respect of emergency planning and those sort of issues, and she is happy with the proposals for the application, obviously the clearing out of the trash screens and the ongoing maintenance of those. So in terms of those issues for the exception test, they are passed in this particular case. I think that answers the points that were raised. Thank you.
Councillor Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Jackson has actually answered my question. So.
Okay. I'm going to bring you back to bottom of page. Actually, it's the top of page 64. And one of the further tests that we should be looking at is whether insurance can be gained or not. And that's something the Environment Agency have actually asked us as an authority, or passed to us. They just sort of passed the buck again and said, can insurance be gained or not? Have we done that test? If we haven't done that test, can we possibly pass this? Is the development sustainable? And I think this was my argument when it first came, that I wasn't convinced that this is a sustainable area for a development because of the ongoing flood risks. And I know that it's probably on tenuous grounds. I know there are issues around it, but I still don't feel that I could guarantee the safety of the people going into it. I don't think I would like to sign this authority up to the potential of lawsuit if we are the people that are liable. And I'm, by the way, the Environment Agency have just passed the buck. I think we may well be. It also asks whether there is a flood risk upstream or downstream. Well, yes is the answer. There's a risk. There's a flood barrier down by the river, not too far away. And I have it on very good authority that we came to within about 2 inches of the water coming over the top of the barrier at one point last year. It was very nip and tuck, and I know a lot of people were down there with sandbags making sure that it didn't. We kind of got away with that one. All this would have an impact on this property, because what goes down that river what goes down the town drain to the river can soon come back up again. Now, the house itself, the people in it might be okay, but I don't believe that you would be able to get to them to help them if they weren't. Because the pump house is aptly named because it pumps water out all the time. It's, you know, it's an area that does suffer from flooding. As a local resident, I know that it suffers from flooding. Your councillors from all over the rest of the borough, you haven't got that local knowledge, and I accept that. And if it was the opposite way around, I can fully understand how Councillor Chillingworth had come to the conclusion he's come to. But I cannot bring myself to support this application, although I must applaud the applicant on all the efforts he's made to try and mitigate the issues from the last committee. Councillor Hazel?
Thank you, Chair. What about the property on the other side of the town drain? Do they flood? Does the pump house flood? I mean, I find it quite odd that everything is just on this house, and yet are the Victorian houses on the other side of that drain? I mean, I just find it all a bit strange that just one area.
No, it's not just one area. The town drain floods and it comes up over the sides. But we are looking at this application, and you know, there's no point trying to make things. We're here to try and not to make things worse. It's Councillor McLean, and then we're going to go to Mr. Cairns.
Thank you, Chair. There was a question asked to how many metres deep this floods. I'd also like to know why we are responsible for the environment's job. They are to keep all the culverts and everything clear. Time and time again, we have this come up locally in the countryside. I mean, I have flooding in my area, and it's due to the drainage. And it's due to all the services that are put onto that it cannot hold the volume of water. Yet the environment are there to do a job to keep it clear, or if they don't, they should enforce it. Ditches are being dug all the time now because it's been, noted over the last few years the rain levels changed and the environment, the weather patterns changed. But this is just weather evolving over the years. We can't be held responsible for all climate change. We do have these flash floods. We have done since I've been a child. So, we have to make allowances for all this sort of weather. And I think the environment have a lot to answer for and should do their job.
Mr. Cairns.
Thank you, Chair. I think everyone's obviously sympathetic to all of the points that have been raised, and particularly the fact that summer storm events are increasing in intensity as part of patterns of climate change. Certainly, one of the issues that's been raised is whether the council has any liability should any flood event damage this property or significantly or life and limb. And what I was going to suggest is that what we can do is if members were so minded, is to defer this for a legal opinion to clarify whether we are in fact adopting any form of liability in this case. And in the event that we are not, to delegate to officers to determine the application in accordance with the recommendation, alternatively to report it back if that legal opinion suggests that the council is actually adopting any form of liability whatsoever. It's only a suggestion, but one that members may wish to consider.
Councillor Chillingworth, you actually have the proposal. Councillor McLean, did you want to speak?
If we're going to get legal advice, could we please have the Environment Agency here to stand their ground and let us know the flooding issues, the meterage, or, you know, how much danger they're all in this particular area, please?
Councillor Chillingworth, you have the
That's a very positive suggestion from Mr. Cairns. Your main point, Chairman, was on the liability, the risk to the council. If we clarify that, I'm very happy to ask for it to be deferred for that decision and then for officers to approve. Because going back to the point I made earlier, we did consider all these things last time, and we decided that the only reason for refusal was the overbearing nature of the proposal on the adjoining property, and that has been resolved. So I'll go back to why I proposed it, that we've dealt with the flooding issue, and although I accept it will be reassuring to receive legal advice, officers should approve it on our behalf.
Councillor Hayes.
Well, I would like to propose that we defer this application for the obtaining of legal advice on possible council liability, and that it then be brought back to the committee when the advice is received. And I was not on this committee when it was previously considered, so I don't have the prospect of having to consider it yet a third time. It would only be the second time for me.
Is that proposal seconded? In which case I'll second that proposal. However,
Chairman, you did have a proposal from Councillor Chillingworth first.
Yes.
You didn't invite that to be seconded.
It's been seconded by Councillor Moore. It was seconded immediately, sorry.
Thank you.
So we have a proposal on the table, proposed by Councillor Chillingworth, seconded by Councillor Moore, that we accept the application deferred until a legal, we defer the application subject to legal advice regarding liability risk to the council. Is that correct? All those in favour?
To be decided by officers if that is possible.
Sorry, that's deferred and delegated to officers if there is no liability to the council. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favour.
All those against?
1, 2, 3, 4 against.
And anyone abstaining?
1 abstention.
Thank you. That's been deferred and will be delegated to officers. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:05. We are going to take a 10-minute break and be back at 15:15 to start promptly, please. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're resuming the meeting. We have item 7.5, Marlow Way, Colchester, and it will be Eleanor Moss to present.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks planning permission for a single-storey first extension over the existing flat roof garage and also a single-storey rear extension. However, it's worth noting now that the single-storey rear extension has already been accepted in principle in the last application. So this slide demonstrates the existing plot. You can see the front elevation there, which is to the top right. You'll notice that there's asymmetry in the design, and also, sorry, that's the rear extension, my apology. But you'll still notice that there's asymmetry in the design, and there's a column of render. There's a lot of asymmetry in the area, but also the area of Marlow Way is quite mixed and diverse as well in terms of style and design. This is the front elevation as existing. So you'll see there is the flat roof garage, which projects to the front, and also there is the column of render, which is the common design feature. This is the proposed rear extension, but as I said, this has already been accepted in principle. You'll see on the bottom that the front extension is there, and there's approximately 1.1 metre recessed from the front of the garage. And this is probably the main slide that we'll be concentrating on. This is the front elevation. As you can see that there is French windows, however this is balustraded, therefore you cannot actually walk out onto the remaining flat roof. And also the asymmetry and render column has been incorporated into this design. Moving on to the photographs, this is 31 Marlow Way as it is existing. The flat roof garage is protruding there, and also the render which I picked up on earlier, and also the asymmetry within the design. This is a photograph of 29 Marlow Way, which is directly to the south of the application site. This photo demonstrates the spacing between the two properties. You can see that both of them have protruding flat roof garages on the front elevation. This is also the street scene looking down to the south. You'll see 29 Marlow Way there to the left, and also there's a small high-rise window there. This is it also looking down to the south, the street scene. As you can see, it's quite well covered with existing trees. This is directly opposite the property, and as you can see, there's to the right render column and also asymmetry in the design. However, those two properties are different in design. And this is looking up to the north, and this also you can see that there is a definite mix of styles and designs within the area. I just go on to my the recommendation is for approval. The proposed front extension does not infringe on any 45-degree rule coming from the nearest point, midpoint of the neighbouring property, and also it's considered acceptable in design.
Thank you very much. Could I call Stuart Wilshire, please? Same rules apply. You'll have 3 minutes. A bell will go after 2.
Okay, good evening, members. My name is Stuart Wilshire, a Principal Town Planner, and I am here this evening to speak on behalf of Mr. and Mr. Gibbs, who live at 29 Marlow Way, adjacent to the application site. Before I proceed further, there are a number of discrepancies within the committee report which need to be emphasised. For example, paragraph 4.1 states that the extension will provide an additional bedroom. It will, in fact, only provide a larger bedroom, not an additional bedroom. Paragraph 10.1 states that only one objection was received. In fact, a number of objections have been made, including from the residents of 29 Marlow Way, myself acting for 29 Marlow Way, and 46 Marlow Way, whose objections still stand. And paragraph 15.1 states that the extension will match the width of the existing garage. Clearly, the extension will match the width of the entire single-storey element, the garage and the porch. A significant difference to what is printed in the report and which is harmful to Marlow Way. Turning to our concerns regarding the proposal, and in particular your officer's description of the site. The officer refers to the application property's asymmetrical design and roof. Importantly, the officer confirms that the property mirrors the next door dwelling, i.e. 29 mile away, and members will be aware that there are numerous other examples of mile away of these types of property which have retained their original asymmetrical design and which mirror other properties on mile away. The relationship between 29 and 31 mile away will therefore be harmed by the proposal. Therefore, it is my professional opinion that, should permission be granted for the proposed development, the resultant dwelling will stand apart from other dwellings in the street and will look out of character. This clearly conflicts with policy DP1 of the Development Policies DPD, which confirms that all development must be designed to a high standard and must respect and enhance the character of the site, its context and surroundings, height, size, scale and townscape. Indeed, members will be aware that a similar scheme was refused earlier this year, with the reason for refusal stating that the proposal is harmful to the character and appearance of the dwelling and the street scene. Furthermore, we remain concerned at the impact of the proposed extension on the amenities of Mr. and Mrs. Gibbs' property. The resultant extension will create a blank, oppressive and dominant elevation when seen from their property, which will be particularly apparent from their garden and from views out of their bedroom window. Concerns over this impacts were raised when your officers refused permission earlier this year, and it is my professional opinion that harm will be caused to their amenities should the extension be allowed. In conclusion, therefore, having given the scheme due consideration and visited the site on numerous occasions, I believe that the proposed development will be harmful to the character and appearance of Mile Away and harmful to the amenities of 29 Mile Away, and consequently fails to comply with policy DP1 of your development policies DPD.
Thank you very much. Hope you had time to say most of what you wish to. Now I have Councillor Buston as a visiting councillor. You will have 5 minutes and the bell will go after 4.
Mr Chairman, thank you very much indeed, members. Good evening. I was requested to call in the matter for basically the reasons stated in the officer's report, although those are somewhat truncated and are somewhat succinct to the rather more detailed notes that were put forward. A number of points to assist members. I was somewhat surprised, in fact, that this site didn't seem to merit a visit this afternoon. I don't know why that would be, and I don't know whether or not that would have helped or hindered members in their consideration. The reports, just as a general item, I suggest we need to be quite careful how reports are prepared to come across, and it must be made quite clear that when call-ins are made, they are made at the request of residents, and that of itself doesn't or should not signify or otherwise that a member that called it in was supporting or not supporting, simply because by doing that they could lead themselves to an element of predetermination, which then could exclude them from the committee. Just a passing point. Principally, the resident is concerned about, as far as I could see, a significant stepping forward of the property by some 3.6 metres from what is presumed to be what is called the building line. There are two aspects to this. If indeed it was a building line that was imposed by the original planning permission for the properties in Marlow Way, that could create a planning problem there, in which event that would be a planning issue. I haven't seen that, so I don't know. But secondly, if the transfer from the original builder imposed a building line and a restriction in that, although that is a legal issue, members will be aware it's not a planning issue, although it could involve the applicants, if they do that, in injunctive proceedings if an objector wished to do so and could prove it. Finally, and going into the substance of the officer's report, which clearly had spent some time looking at the property, I was a little bit puzzled, and I would be obliged for a bit of clarification on the point that was raised in 15.6, which I think was quite relevant. The new front roof area appears to be without any protection if anybody goes out on it. And it would appear from the notes that an application was not approved, which included a balcony, yet this, which doesn't include any safety railing at all, is acceptable. I just was a little puzzled on that, and I wonder if in producing the report, officers might be able to assist further to explain why this seeming anomaly comes forward. Otherwise, the items are as stated in the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask for clarification from the officer.
So going back to the first point raised, obviously we had Chair's briefing earlier, which we discussed the amendments and the amendment sheet. So we discussed the general comment raised by 46, which was given during the first revision, and that was the design of the elevation was a lot different to what members can see today. They were already consulted on this scheme. Unfortunately, we haven't had a further comment from 46. As I mentioned earlier, there is a mix of development within the street scene that can be demonstrated within the photos. With regards to the previous refusal, it was refused on design grounds because it was introducing a third material element to the front elevation, and this didn't appear to be in keeping with the original. In addition, the flat roof garage area was to be used as a balcony area, and therefore there is balustrading all around the outside of the flat roof. However, as you can see from this application, this has been removed, and there is a line, if you can see it on this diagram, going through the French windows. This is glass balustrading, and therefore there is no chance that the occupants could actually enter the flat roof area and use it as a balcony. And also it would not pass building regulations without any sort of balustrading. So I can confirm that there will be balustrading, and they cannot use this flat roof area to step out onto, and therefore cannot overlook the neighbouring property. And that was the clarification for 15.6. It might be worth noting that the neighbouring property uses their front flat roof area as a sort of informal patio area, and we've used their patio doors as the midpoint for the 45-degree rule, and this does not infringe that. The bedroom windows are further away, but we've used the patio doors to ensure that overbearing is not infringed in this instance. Thank you.
As the ward councillor, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to point out that this has not been a very pleasant experience for the, Mr. and Mrs. Gibbs here for several reasons. First of all, having requested calling to their two ward councillors, unfortunately those emails did not get through to us, and we had to ask for a late call-in, and graciously the committee accepted that. So it wasn't a very good experience. And secondly, representative of the applicant posted some very unpleasant comments on the website about Mr. and Mrs. Gibbs and their position, and that was later withdrawn at my request. So it hasn't, I say, been very pleasant. And I think it's further brought about some unsatisfactory feeling in the report, where I think in some of the amendments you've addressed those issues, but I would say that to describe 3 items on there as typographical errors is somewhat misleading, because it's not my idea of typographical errors. When you refer to the proposed first floor extension matching the width of the existing garage, when in fact it's something in the region of 80% greater, although not intentional, it is, if we hadn't picked up on this, it would be misleading for the committee. I think also the question of the bedroom being an additional bedroom rather than enlarging an existing bedroom, again, was misleading. So I say, all in all, this has been unsatisfactory, but in terms of the planning application, I would say that this particular proposal is out of keeping with Marlow Way. Marlow Way, as you've seen from those photographs, is a very attractive road. The houses are individual, but I think they don't have these types of extensions on the frontage of them. This one would stand out, I think, in an unattractive way. So I do think it is out of keeping with the landscape of Marlow Way. It's too large, and I couldn't support this application. Thank you.
I don't have any other speakers, so I'm going to go next. Just to answer really Councillor Buston's query on site visits, we had a very full programme today. In fact, we started at 1 o'clock this afternoon at the castle. Had we had a lighter agenda, I may possibly have put Marlow Way onto it. The invitation is always open to members of the committee and indeed any councillor to contact myself or their group spokes if they don't particularly want to contact somebody from another party, and I'll always take I always try to take extra site visits wherever I can. Obviously there's logistics today probably would not have allowed it or would have made it very, very difficult. We'd have probably been looking at a 12 o'clock start, but I'd have been willing to do it. But that's how the site visits work. So if you think that a site visit would be key to determining an application, then it's down to the ward councillors to let us know. I have looked at this application. I understand where the residents are coming from. I understand that, yes, it will be something that's a bit different. I know Marlow Way reasonably well, and it is quite different. In many ways, it's a bit like Wivenhoe, lots of little different bits put together and no sort of uniformity. We had a training course on design recently, and it was about thirds and how sometimes things don't look right because they're not within thirds. And there's a little squiggly thing that's used, and it was quite impressive. I don't know how other members of the committee feel about this one, having known what we said, but I think this one looks okay. I can't see anything in that which immediately says, oh, hang on, this is wrong. So I would be happy to support the officer's recommendation on this. Councillor Moore?
I wonder if I could be indulged again. It's the issue of the plan and next door. And I heard the officer say that because they sat out on the top of their garage, that was they were taking that into account in the 45-degree rule. But ignoring that they sit there, which could, if you like, a first floor garden, does it infringe 45 degrees, the bulk of the house, the main part of the house?
The 45-degree rule we take from the midpoint of the nearest window. So in this instance, we took it from their patio doors, which are on the first floor of the front elevation, and it doesn't infringe that policy. Regardless, if you took it from the windows, the bedroom windows that are on the same elevation, it wouldn't infringe this policy.
And, sorry, can I just follow that up with, there was a question about the building line and whether the garage came over the building line or whether the building line was actually the front of the main part of the properties.
So this is the photo of the existing property, and you can see that the flat roof garage projects from the front elevation. The proposal will be articulated back from the existing garage, and therefore the garage would remain as a dominant feature when you view it from the street view. And as you would incorporate the front projecting garage within the building line, it wouldn't protrude the building line, it would sit within it quite comfortably.
Thank you.
Councillor Lilly and then Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Like yourself, I can't see much wrong with this. I think if you did have the squiggly lines, as you put it, it was a very good training session. I think I'll support your proposal, and we'll go with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Councillor Hayes.
Well, I'm just looking again at the reasons for referral to the Planning Committee in paragraph 1 on page 106, and I'm not entirely convinced that it's necessary for the proposal to lead to an enhancement of the area's character. And I wonder if we could have guidance on that. And the other objections, am I right, they're all matters of really of impression and discretion for the Planning Committee.
So regards to extensions, we'd expect them to readily fit in with the street scene. We'd expect them to respect the original dwelling, and when you viewed them, they wouldn't be jarring, or your first impression when you looked at the property is not considered that this proposal be in breach of any of those aspects. With regards to the second point, which was, sorry?
Well, I think my main one was, is it necessary for it to enhance the character of the street scene?
Well, no, in conclusion, but as I said, we would expect any extension to respect the original dwelling. This area is not within a conservation area, and therefore it isn't expected to enhance the area, so to speak.
Okay, I have no more speakers. I do have a proposal that has been seconded on the table. Could I ask all those in favour?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favour.
All those against?
And 1 against.
And there's no abstentions. Okay, and that concludes the evening. Thank you very much.